Do you consider yourself to be a cat person? Especially a ferocious, predatory cat? Especially a ferocious, predatory cat that is the SVR model? Well, of course, naturally I'm talking about a vehicle, not a car, but an SUV from Jaguar. And like everybody else, including all the big luxury brands, naturally Jaguar has to have their version of an SUV because SUVs are so ridiculously popular. But this is, unlike all the rest, a uniquely Jaguar type of vehicle with a supercharged V8 engine and all kinds of quirky things that make Jaguars Jaguar. Want to learn more? Come with me. So friends, if you're a Jaguar and you're an SUV, what in the world would you call yourself? Well, you'd think maybe some kind of a feline term would be the thing you'd use to describe this vehicle, but the fact is, this is called the F-Pace. And there's also an E-Pace and an I-Pace. And the F-Pace is kind of a, I'd say it's a, size-wise, it kind of slots in between a compact SUV and a mid-size SUV. Although it's hard to say because it has a fairly long wheelbase of 113.15 inches. And it has a fairly wide stance. And it's not a three-row, so that would make it more in the compact area. But it is very much a really, really versatile Jaguar because it has so much cargo room in it for a Jaguar. Although in the old days, the Jaguar 6 sedans and stuff always had nice big trunks and things, but this is a whole different kettle of fish, including, naturally, being an SUV, it has all-wheel drive. And in this particular guise, the SVR, it has an amazingly potent 5-liter V8 supercharged engine that develops a whole lot of horsepower, which we'll talk about shortly. But as you can see, it has a certain kind of understated elegance. Again, very typical of Jaguars. And there's a little vehicle going by there. Hello, wave everybody. And like all European SUVs, it is very, very aerodynamic and also has what I consider to be a fairly fast back roofline. If you'll look here, you see. We slope down, we lose some cargo capacity doing that, but we also gain the fastback lifestyle, which means this thing is actually very, very quick. It's also very quiet. That's one of the nicest things about it. When we start driving around here later in this video, you're going to see it's a very, very quiet, solid feeling vehicle. And something else they've done since the F-Pace has been around, some people complained in the past about it having kind of a stiff ride for a luxury brand like Jaguar, but the fact is this one, in my experience so far, it has a very firm but a very comfortable ride. And naturally there are multiple drive modes and all those good things to suit your mood on the day and also the terrain conditions you may be driving on. Now, could you take this thing off-road? Well, yeah, a little bit, but it's not overwhelmingly tall, meaning it doesn't have a whole lot of ground clearance. And the tires are much better suited for high-performance dry roads, or they should do very, very well in snow as well. So this is the kind of vehicle you take for your winter activities. If you enjoy skiing and things like this, this would be a real good choice for you. But without further ado, I want to jump right into the engine compartment because there's something very special under the hood that's very, very Jaguar. And that is a supercharged V8 engine. So join me beneath the aluminum bonnet. So did you know out of all the automobile manufacturers, probably the one that, in terms of mass production, has the most experience working with aluminum, it's Jaguar, because they've been doing it for a long, long time. And so this big old hood right here is not very heavy because it's probably completely made of aluminum. And other companies, including when Range Rover came under the big bonnet that is Jaguar and Range Rover, they and of course Land Rover, they started to adopt a lot of aluminum in their vehicles, as did Ford. When Ford owned all these companies for a brief period of time, they got a lot of the technology in terms of aluminum fabrication from the Jaguar group. A guy once told me that when Range Rover is right across the hall from Jaguar, they'd literally go over to the other side. And when they were actually creating, this is like 4 or 5 years in advance when they're first designing the latest generation of a Land Rover, they would go to them, and that's where the aluminum stuff started, is with Jaguar. So they've always had the ability to do all kinds of wonderful fabrication with aluminum. And there's multiple advantages to that, one of which is lighter weight. It's also extremely good in impact. If you have a crash, aluminum is really good at absorbing energy. So I mention all this just because I always think about it whenever I lift up the hood of a Jaguar Land Rover, because you can always tell it's made out of aluminum. Now, what do we have here? Well, here is a very interesting power plant. This is a 5-liter V8 with a supercharger, not turbocharging, supercharging. Again, another thing very, very popular with Jaguar and Range Rover. They like to do that. And as you can see with this particular version, we have dual air intakes, one over here and one over here, and that goes into the center, and right in the center here, right here where I'm putting my hand, that's where our supercharger pulleys are. It goes directly into this and spins the supercharger, which compresses the air and goes into the engine array. See this here? Aluminum. So you see it all over the car, little touches of aluminum that are, in addition to being lightweight, strong, that kind of thing. And, it tends to last pretty well and tends to avoid things like rust completely. There is corrosion with aluminum, but it's a different animal. So you'll see this throughout the car, and especially in the suspension, everywhere. And the engine is no exception. Speaking of this is the SVR engine, which, depending on who you believe, whether you believe Jaguar or Jaguar, it either has 550 or 500, or let's start that over again. 550 horsepower or 542 horsepower. 550 is what the Monroney says, the sticker, and the specifications on the Jaguar website say 542. Well, regardless, that's a difference of 8 whopping horsepower when you're talking over 500 anyway, so not a big deal. There is the spread of power, which is from 6,250 RPM to 6,500 RPM is where that actual peak of power is. And much wider spread is your torque, and there seems to be agreement on how much torque this engine puts out, because it's 516 pounds of feet at anywhere from 3,500 all the way up to 5,000 RPM. So that is a really, really staunch bit of stump pulling that you can do with this thing. And it also means that when you drive it in the snow, you got to be careful, because this thing will just take off on you. But they've, so far with my driving experience, they've done a wonderful job with the 8-speed transmission and the all-wheel drive system at making sure the power gets to the ground very, very efficiently and very predictably. It's not anything that's going to just rip out of your hands and make you crazy. Up here, one thing I'm just noticing right here, you can see in the hood, those air scoops there appear to be semi-functional. They don't tie directly into an air system, but they certainly circulate some air around the engine. So, because whenever you have something that's packed in here like this and is putting out so much horsepower, it's also generating a lot of heat. So you got to watch that, because you don't want to overheat yourself and then melt all that aluminum. You don't want that. But it is a very, very smooth, interesting power plant. We'll talk more about it when we're out driving. But that's the SVR version. Now there is a different version of the F-Pace. Has like a 4-cylinder engine that I believe is turbocharged, but this is what you want. If you're going to get this vehicle, I think you owe it to yourself to get this big V8 because it's that much of a pleasure to drive. And it really makes a Jaguar. A Jaguar. He's frightening looking, that fella right there, isn't he? Boy, he looks like he looks like a joker. Strange. Anyway, that's our power plant. Let's move on to the rest of our chassis. So the question is, what kind of paws do we have on our cat? Well, in this case, you have some, first of all, you got to just take, you have to take pause and take a look at how enormous these wheels are. These are 22-inch wheels on this F-Pace. You have some beautiful Pirelli Scorpion Zero all-season tires. And kind of like it, with the same practice that BMW does a lot with a lot of their vehicles, especially the SUVs. You have a different tire size in the front and the back in terms of width. They're both 22-inch wheels and therefore 22-inch tires. Your fronts are in fact 265/40s R22s, and they are all-season tires, mud and snow rated. So I think they'd be good in the snow, and they're definitely good on dry pavement. But anything beyond that, I think you'd need to put some different kind of rubber on here. I have no idea what for a luxury vehicle like this, but anyway, take a feisty look at these massive brakes on this thing with that beautiful big red caliper and those massive rotors. This thing weighs about 4,600 pounds, roughly. It depends. Again, specifications are difficult on some of these Jags because one thing says one thing and another says the other. But I think you're safe if you say 4,600 pounds. That's pretty close to what it weighs. In terms of trailer towing, by the way, 5,291 pounds. They got it down to the pound in terms of what you can actually tow with this thing. But here's our 113-inch wheelbase. And our rear tire, which like I say is a 22-inch wheel, it in fact is a 295/35 R22. So a much wider tire on the back. And again, all this is in the, more than anything else, is to enhance the handling of the vehicle at speed on dry pavement when you're driving like a banshee type of person, if you're into that banshee driving. But look, even the rear brakes, you could tell so much by the rear brakes on the vehicle. Two different things. They're usually much, much smaller than the front brakes, just because when you're doing your braking, most of the weight shifts to the front, and therefore the load on the brakes is much greater in the front than it is in the back. But the more balanced the vehicle is, the more close it has to 50-50 weight distribution, the bigger the rear brakes are, interestingly enough. And as you can see on this the rear brakes on this F-Pace are bigger than a lot of the front brakes on a lot of the competition. I mean, these are massive units here. And again, I mentioned before, look at that beautiful fastback roofline. And so the next question is, how much space do we have in our cargo area? Well, naturally, we have a power lift gate. I mean, come on. And something else that's kind of pleasant is the liftover height here, right here, is about just above knee level. So it's actually very convenient. It's a great split between being too high and too low. I admire that. The amount of room you're looking at right here is roughly 32 cubic feet of space, which if you lower the, watch this here, check this area out. You do that, and nothing happens. I thought that would open that. There we go. Helps if it's operated properly. Wasn't that cool? But anyway, you lower the second row, and you will get up to 70 cubic feet of storage space for your needs. It's very nicely finished with this. Everything looks like, especially the headliner, I think it's at Alcantara, or whatever they call it, type of headliner, which is it's a luxury vehicle thing. Very expensive, but very luxurious, let us say. Now look what we have under here. This will frighten you initially, so I'm asking you to prepare yourself. Whoa! There is your 22-inch temporary spare tire. They want you to remember that you put the temporary spare on, so it's pumpkin colored. And here you have your various accoutrements right there for changing your tires. It looks like some of this has been messed with. Huh. I think everything's in there though. But that's great that you actually have a true spare. So if you are out in the boondocks somewhere, you can in fact replace, you're not up to the whims of either the auto club and or a flat repair kit, which may or may not even work depending on how bad the tire is damaged. So excellent, very high marks to Jaguar for doing that. And again, one of the things that really strikes me on this is how low the liftover is, because it's very convenient for loading. Not the biggest in the class by a margin, but at the same time very useful, and especially good if you want to just throw your skis back there, which some of you, I'm sure, it will be your want to do so. Don't you love them little exhaust ports right there, also known as your tailpipes? We do have a V8, so there's 2 on each side for a total of 4, which is half of the, I don't know how that works. We'll crawl underneath there and we're going to see that it's basically just dual exhaust. But yeah, I like it when they have 4 pipes because it looks cool. But as you can see, this is a very, very stylish machine that is proud to wear the Jaguar name. Now, is it that distinctive from, say, a Porsche Cayenne or something like that? Yeah, it actually is. I mean, again, this one seems a little bit more aerodynamic, and I think it fits in with the Jaguar family just fine, as far as it does have that family resemblance that we all love to see in our, especially our upscale manufacturers. So when you go for the cat, you still get the styling that you deserve, and that's something special. Onward now into the interior. Ah yes, they are called Windsor leather seats because Windsor is of course the castle where the new Queen of England, as one particular newscast, I think it was somewhere in Africa, described King Charles as Queen Charles, which it was some kind of a mistake in the translation, which that happens to all of us. But welcome friends. This is the interior of your Jaguar F-Pace SVR. And hear this blinking here? This is going on here. Well, the fact of the matter is we have a little bit of different stuff going on now. As you can see, the main display screen right now is not blinking because I have the camera adjusted to 60 hertz in terms of anti-flicker. And we know flicker. So that is the decision that I have made. However, there's still going to be stuff blinking on this thing because there's all kinds of, everything's electronic now, and everything has a frequency to how it illuminates itself. So that's how we live now. But anyway, if you look at our instrument cluster, you shall see that I currently have it set on. There are basically 2 different themes here. One is a single gauge theme and the other is a twin gauge theme. Gauge being it is a virtual gauge. It is not an actual analog gauge, of course. But let me show you how we change that. If we come down here on my thumb wheel right here, we gently press that like that, and look at there, we have a selection. Display info panel and display layout are at the top, and we're going to go with display layout. We're going to go to 1 dial so you can see, so you can see it. There we go. And that's what 1 dial looks like. And on the right hand side is your map for your navigation system. Now if we go back, oh dear, that's wrong. Oh dear. If we go back, you also have the ability to fine tune, like for example the right info panel I have right now set on navigation. Now I'll press OK to select, and that will give us, and the radio comes on. Why does it do that? Hell, I don't know. This thing has a mind of its own, so we'll try this again. Display layout, 1 dial we've done. 2 dial, of course, is my favorite. If we want to go with the map, what happens there? Look at that. The entire display is in fact a map, and at the very top, there's your speedometer. At the lower left, we have your fuel, and to the lower right, we have the temperature of your coolant. So, so you still have some of these key functions, as well as your odometer, which we have exactly 7,900 miles on this vehicle, and then our trip odometer, which has 89 miles on it. That's my miles that I've put on this thing. But personally, if I may be honest with you, I prefer the come on there we go, 2-dial for me, because I like having that tachometer, because, you know, look at there, you won't send that sucker around like that, because this is a supercharged V8 engine, and why would you not? 550 horsepower according to the Monroney, the sticker, and 542 according to the specs. Believe what you want, it's all basically the same. You can't tell the difference between those few horsepower. I defy you to be able to tell the difference, unless you're flat out on a racetrack, you know, that kind of thing. Now, one of the things, problems I have with the way Jaguar does things is, and this is not just something that Jaguar does, it's something that the manufacturers in general are doing more and more. They're moving all these functions where there used to be buttons and knobs. There's a couple down here, but basically it's just, this is your rear gate, and this is your intensity of your lighting here on your instrument cluster. But there's a few other knobs and whistles and bells and stuff like that that I normally would expect to have handy. One of them, for example, is if you want to turn the engine auto start-stop button off. There's times where you don't want the engine to shut off when it would otherwise want to do it in order to save fuel. But you want to be able to turn that off from time to time. And to do that, there is no dedicated switch anywhere to do that. But what you have to do is you have to hit this right here and go here, and this will put you into the quick mode on the screen. So there you can find it right there and turn it off, just like I have done. You also have the auto brake hold. You can turn off the screen and auto theme. Oh, what's auto theme? Well, that's whether the lighting is light or dark, and the intensity. But that's it. So, for example, if you want to, let's say you're a person who likes to put the seat heat on. How do you do that? Well, you have to go into this menu, and then this menu, and then seat heat is there. Come on. Oh, I'm sorry, here we go. And here's the driver's side, for example. Then you can turn on, go plus or minus. We'll put it at -3 right now, so that way it'll ventilate. But you see, it's great that it does that, right? It's great that you have these options where you can ventilate or heat the seat, but it takes a while to get to it. And that's kind of loud, isn't it? We'll do this here. There we go. But I don't like the fact that you have to go through all these menus on the main screen in order to do that. As you can see, there's a little bit of a roll to that main screen. That's what frequency that the... I can't get rid of the flicker altogether, but I can slow it down at least, because I only have 2 settings on this camera that can adjust that. So anyhow, what else do we have here? Well, we have here, this is our selector on the end of our turn signal stalk for selecting different displays. At the lower right here, it's saying I'm getting 19.4 miles per gallon, which is amazing. I have a hard time believing that, but if so, more power to you. 265 miles left on the tank, blank of the date, and there's my trip odometer. So that's primarily what that does. Now, as far as the headlights are concerned, you go to automatic there, but then if you want to go there, it's not a detent the way I would normally like it. It works fine. But if you want to go into auto, you got to go on there and it'll pop back. Again, these are choices that they make that I don't understand, to be honest with you. But you may love it. You may love that way of doing things. And another interesting thing about this car, which you would expect from a Jaguar, is it has a kind of a unique way of doing the interior trim, and I find it nice. It's very understated, as you would expect, with fine British coachmanship, because this is in fact made in Great Britain, with a Great Britain built engine and a German transmission, 8 speeds if you're counting. We also have our Alcantara headliner, and that, it seems like that's becoming a mandatory thing on luxury vehicles now, is to have that type of dark. It's almost like microfiber. Matter of fact, there is a car I have tested that does have a microfiber headliner. But that's a luxury thing that you'll appreciate, I guess. I like the fact that it's dark because it holds dirt. It hides dirt a little bit better. But wait a minute, what's this? I go down to our, we're moving now into our climate control, and I press this, and what do we have? Nothing. It's not doing it. There we go. That is another. Now, I was speaking before about there not being direct access to the seat heat, but you can actually access it using this, but you still have more than one step involved. And with most cars, there's a little symbol for your seat, and oh, there's a symbol for there. Oh, that's interesting. I'm not real sure. Well, okay, you can also push this, and this will tell you, and you can adjust your seat heat this way. So, see, I'm a liar. There are ways of doing it. It's just not what I consider to be real intuitive. Most manufacturers these days give you a symbol and a switch right there on the climate control area, and you can just cool or heat, bang, bang, and it's very easy. This, you still have to dick around a little bit with it to find your way to what you want to do. But again, if you're the owner of this vehicle, you'll become accustomed to this stuff real quick, and you'll know where everything is. So, but just be advised, it is different on the Jaguar. And just in general, getting around to all the various menus is, I wouldn't say tedious, but it takes some work. Now, here's our cameras. What can we do with our cameras here? There, right now, we have, that's our 3/4 rear view, which is an interesting one. These are actual flies, if you can see those. I believe they're mayflies. That is my opinion. But look at all the different cameras we have here. We have all these different settings, like if I want to go over here. I press that, and there we are. And you can see my vehicle, which incidentally is dwarfing this little car. There seems to be a perspective thing going on there, because my vehicle is not that large, but it likes to think it is. And then we got this one here, 3/4 there. And then we have, this is an amazing camera system, I'm telling you right now. And this one's one of my favorites. It's directly in front of the vehicle, and there's this stump right here that you don't want to hit. And then we got this side over here. Boink. Oh, wait a minute. Now, let's see what there we go. And that's on the side right there. So you have so many, oh, let's do this one here. I have done that one. There we are. Hello. Hi, I'm waving to you. Can you see? Wait a minute. God, look at the size of these bugs. Oh my God. I knew this, we've had so much rain and now it's turning into spring. I knew this was going to happen. But there you go. Neat. Now we can do the spin. Can we do the spin? Yeah. Ooh, we can do that. Do that. It's pretty amazing, this. I'm indeed impressed with all the things you can do. But again, it's a lot of touchscreen work. We'll go back here now. We have all kinds of different settings for pretty much anything. All surface information. Now this is provides a balanced experience optimized for on-road driving. Alternatively, Jaguar drive control modes can be selected to enhance the driving experience or when negotiating challenging surfaces. However, it is recommended that they are deselected once the reason for their use is no longer applicable. That's a real interesting way of putting it, but they are English and they started the language, so you know they can do what they want. But here's a breakdown and a beautiful graphic of our front and rear drivetrains and what they're up to. Right now we're not doing anything, but it is, as you can see, it's leaning towards the rear drivetrain, and that's all for handling and balance. So absolutely amazing stuff here. There's so much information on this touchscreen, but you have to look for it, you have to find it, and you have to make sure you don't get distracted by it, which is one of the big problems with all these screens now. It's also, it's mounted fairly low, but I like that because as you will, I will be mentioning this several times if I haven't already. I don't think I have in this video just yet. But if you look at the hood line is nice and low on this car, and you can it slopes forward and slopes down, so you can really see what's in front of you. And that can be very good if you do find yourself out on a trail. But just in general, I mean, if you're just negotiating through a parking lot and there's children, naturally there's all kinds of pedestrian warnings and things like that, but it's also really great to be able to actually see what's going on around you. And that's one of my favorite things, believe it or not, about this car is, and it contrasts this with some of the later models like the new Tundra and things. The hood is so far up in your field of view that you can't see out as well as you used to be able to with the older Tundra. And this is better than both. It's very similar in some ways to the BMW X series of SUVs, because they also are really great at how you can see over that front hood. I give them kudos for doing that. So where were we? Oh yes. So we were in the climate control area, which is very comprehensive and actually fairly easy to deal with, because like if you want to turn auto off, nothing happens if you do that. So you have to select a mode that you no longer want to do auto anymore, and that's that. And that turns off the fan on that. That turns it back on. And again, you will have to wade your way through this literally. Oh, this is interesting what it says right here. It says established 1935, Jaguar, Coventry, England. How about that? But here, this is not 1935 because this is 2024, and here is our area to charge our portable electronic device. Mainly your phone, actually. And that seems to work great, by the way. I've used it with my iPhone that has a case on it, and it charges beautifully. The wireless charging, as they say. Okay. One of the stranger things here is how small this button is here for the stop, start, turn off, turn on engine, and activate engine. I don't really like it being there, and I don't like it being that small, but again, you get used to it. Now, one of the things you might notice is missing here. I noticed this right away. There is no provision anywhere for your park brake as far as the manual application of your park brake, except there is, but it's not done in a conventional way. As you can see, we're in park right here, and to put the vehicle in gear, you press, there's a little paddle right here, and then you go back like this, and now we're in drive. And then you press it and go into the sport mode. In the sport mode, then you use your paddles here, plus and minus, plus and minus. So that's all well and good, right? And then your reverse is right there, and then you got all your beautiful backup cameras and everything else. But when you put it in park, it also activates the parking brake and the emergency brake. Now, what if you're driving and you have a system failure? Your brakes go out. Someone's cut your brake lines, and so you don't have any more hydraulic brakes anymore. How do you activate the electronic parking brakes? Well, you use the P button. You use the parking brake button, and it will gradually engage the rear park brake. Now, I don't know. I haven't tested that, and I'm probably not going to as far as in an emergency situation, but I prefer having a dedicated parking brake something. Now it's just a little thing you pull with your finger. Instead of course, pedals are almost completely gone on most vehicles now. And the pedal was good because you could have a nice progressive application of the rear brakes. And then, of course, you had a handbrake lever, which was the best of all, because that's when you can do your handbrake turns and lock up the rear wheels and spin her around like we love to do. But all this stuff is disappearing now. And the good side of that is that these electronic or electric systems are much, much easier to deal with in terms of maintenance. And if you have a problem and they need to replace a component to that, it's much, much simpler, because all you have run into the rear wheels is a wire, and then there's a solenoid and an actuator that goes on, usually a dedicated pair of smaller brake pads that go onto the disc or go onto something else. But bottom line being, they're actually much more easy for mechanics to deal with if there's a problem, and they work very, very effectively. I remember when they started appearing, I spoke with through email with my friend Jake over at Consumer Reports, And they had done a lot of testing on these new cars with this, and they were very satisfied with how well that system worked in an emergency situation. So, and they know that's what they do. So, okay, what else is here? Well, here's our mode button, and in order to activate, you press it and it pops up, and then you have comfort, dynamic, eco, and ADSR, which is all ADSR has been selected while vehicle is stationary, foot is off the accelerator. Activate low traction launch. That's a bunch of no doubt traction control systems to get you on your way if you're like standing on ice or something like that, I guess. But here we have the eco mode. It turns everything green. Comfort, which is where I normally leave it because everything is tweaked by these buttons, including suspension stiffness. If you go over to dynamic, which is oh so fun, you can hear it, the exhaust actually changes. There's a slight difference. You want to do that again? We'll do that again for you. Off, and now on. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but isn't that interesting? But that's for your dynamic control system. And then you push it back down and it locks wherever it is. That's well enough. This is our radio control. You can adjust the volume or turn it on and off. As you can see, there are 0 radio knobs of any kind. And navigating the radio system is just like any other car that depends on the touchscreen to do that. It's a pain in the butt. But you can find everything you want. You put your favorites in. But it takes so much longer and takes so many more steps to do that than it does with even going back a few years. You know, with the conventional, when we first started seeing these big central displays, the systems that were on those vehicles, I feel like, were so much more straightforward in how you actuate. And you still had a volume knob and a tuning knob, and that makes it fast and easy. But no, we got to do it complicated now. So that's the way of things. That's the way of things. So what else do we have? This is our off-road traction control, if you call it that. This is, I don't know what the hell that is. Oh, I know what that is. That's the exhaust. So if you want the exhaust louder, yeah, they're real into that, aren't they? They're real into changing the sound of the exhaust. Is that enhanced to the audio system, or is that, I think that's the actual exhaust that does that. There must be baffles or something. There's something going on. Here is where we turn off our traction controls, should you so desire. So that's basically this whole operational system right here. It's different. It's a Jaguar. They do it a little different. And here we have our cute little cubby that is known as the center console.
I missed that. How can I help?
I didn't ask you to do anything. Go away. Thank you. Bye. It does that periodically. It seems to detect something in my voice that I want to interact with it, and I don't. You have both a USB-C and a USB-A-B, or your standard USB, right there inside here for you to actuate if you need to. This is you can close that off, by the way, if you don't want to see that. You don't want to see this thing here, you can hide it. But when you do that, of course, you also get rid of your cup holders, and nothing's more important on a modern vehicle than cup holders. So, what else? Storage-wise, there is our glove box, and it's actually fairly roomy. It's fairly wide. And could you get a tablet in here? Yeah, I think as long as it's not a huge tablet, you could definitely get a tablet in here. Up top, we have both the ability to open. Gonna let all the bugs in. Here is a very, very substantial sunroof. I mean, look at that, folks. That's well, it only opens halfway. Wait, can I go further? Nope, that's it. Well, it looked like it was just going to keep on going, but it opens up to about the normal size of most sunroofs. But then you have this lovely panoramic, and then right here, here's our shade, and you should be able to do that and close the shade. Oh, sorry, I did it wrong. And here we are closing our shade, and the panorama is so big that it takes quite a while. There she comes. How about that, huh? It's a translucent sort of thing. It's not completely opaque. And now we'll open her up, and there we go. So that's pretty much our front seats. As I told you, we have this lovely Windsor leather. It's kind of a smooth and suede. It is a combination. These are very strange seats because they just do. For one thing, the back of the seat is fairly thin, and you still have access to all the wonderful things like lumbar support and everything else that you have on most luxury vehicles. But it's a pretty firm seat, and if you're not accustomed to that, if you want something cushier, this may not be the package for you. The SVR package may not be the way you want to go, because this is really designed for spirited driving and to keep you in place more than it is for pure comfort. So just keep that in mind, will you? Okay, let's go back aft. We're going to see what we got out here. How big is our rear seat? Ooh, the door opening is about what you get with most compacts, almost 90 degrees when you open it. And I've got the front seat back fairly far, so let's see how our legroom is. It's okay, it's good. You have a lot of headroom. I don't know what the hell that sound was. Oh yeah, I know what that was. That was not related to the car, fear not. We have a belt line that I would say is, it's a little higher than in the front, but it's perfectly acceptable. It's not too excessively high, so you're not going to feel claustrophobic back here. And how far does the window go? The window does not go completely down, goes about 90%. Not unusual in this day and age. There are no, I don't see any shades here. That's surprising on a vehicle at this price point. But, pardon me. You do have some good features for your rear seat passengers. Room is good, but not great. It's about like something I would say like, it's much more in the realm of like the RAV4 CRV type of situation. It's not super roomy back here, but except for the headroom, which is very, very generous if you have a taller occupant. But you do have heated seats back here, and you do have access to 2 USB-C ports. Both sides have a little thing it's good for small stuff. I don't really think you can get anything like a laptop, a tablet. Well, yes, a smaller tablet will fit here. But you can plug it in right there, and we have a fairly sizable drive shaft tunnel. So if you have 3 passengers back here, which you could fit 3 people back here, but the center's going to have to splay their legs to be comfortable. What do we have here? Let's see how our all-important armrest is. It's good. It's a jaunty angle. It's a pretty good size. It's pretty good height. So it's comfortable back here. And again, kind of like the front seats, the rear seats are firmer and very, very supportive. Supportive, I should say. Supportive? They support you well. And look here, you got this little crate. You can look in here if you want to. Look at that. It's like landing an X-wing. Isn't that great? Oh, I love that. But it's a nice environment back here. And one thing that this vehicle, that you can't tell right now, but one of the great things about this vehicle is how quiet it is. It's a very, very quiet SUV at speed. And that'll be something that your passengers can enjoy, as well as this excellent Meridian sound system, which sounds terrific, as you would expect, again, at this price point. And if you're a rear seat passenger, you can really enjoy the panorama, and you can really enjoy the incredible headliner, that fancy Alcantara, or whatever it is. But there you go. That's pretty much the interior of our F-Pace SVR. Different, interesting. I don't agree with all the choices Jaguar has made as far as how their control layout is done, but it's certainly not awful. It's certainly manageable, especially once you get used to it. And it's very attractive, so like the rest of the car. So with no further ado, let's see how she goes, shall we? All right, let's hear that. That's called your supercharger. And it is super, and it charges the engine with a, let us just say, a compressed charge of air, you see, that goes right in, and is this one is belt driven. At least it sure looked like it was. I don't have a whole lot of information about the details of this engine, just because I don't have a whole lot of information on it, because that's just the way it is. But in time, you know, I'm going to go back to, this is interesting. You can tell that the ride is firmer under this mode. But if I go over to, no, I'm not going there. I'm not dynamic. Oh, dynamic goes red. Well, we'll play with that for a while. Our dynamic mode is, oh boy, yeah, that's stiffer. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It does feel like it's just gonna whip around anywhere too. Boy, it does feel responsive to your steering inputs. And it's all designed, oh yeah, it feels like the steering has been sharpened up just a little bit. And in addition to that, the suspension is definitely firmer, and the response is pretty quick. Yeah, this is the SVR, which is a special vehicle rhododendron. That's what the SVR stands for, or I don't really know, sure. But it definitely makes a big difference. A lot of these times when you change modes on a car, it doesn't make that big difference. Now we're gonna right away go down to comfort. That's where we want to be, and see what that does to our suspension. Let's see if it softens it up considerably. It's funny because this is a very well designed suspension, in that even when it's on the comfort setting, you still have very responsive handling, but it does make a pretty dramatic difference in terms of your ride quality. Much more compliant than it was, say, on, I don't know, dynamic. And then we had briefly we're on the off-road mode, which was fun and exciting for all of us. But overall, I can't get over, my number one thing I always come back to every time I get in this car and drive it is how much quieter it is than so many other luxury vehicles I've driven recently. And I mean, that goes for every aspect of it. There's not even a whole lot of tire noise, although the tires are just your basic all-season Pirelli Scorpions. Very, very good quality tire for most circumstances, except like mud, rocks, serious off-road stuff. Not the best choice in the world for tires, but it's good. You also have another nice feature on this car is it's got tons of braking power. You barely have to touch the brakes on this thing, and it just takes off beautifully. And we'll have to see what our manual mode looks like. I think we just bust her over, or just go that way. Yep, we are now on S. It tells you on the display you're in 5th, and it's recommending that you should be in 8th, which is the top gear. But we'll go down to 5 and 4, 3 and 2 and 1. Now, with so many of these vehicles like this that have all this performance, a lot of times the first and second gear are used. Hear that? We're just shifting like crazy. The first 2 gears are usually fairly high, so I think a little bit that is partially designed to have a degree of off-road performance, so you can creep along fairly slowly and still be within the power band. All right, we'll go. We've gone back to drive now. We're going to let it do all the thinking for us. But as you can hear, it's very responsive in terms of the paddle shifting manual mode. Also known, I think, as sport mode, because there's an S associated with it. But we are zooming about, and it is ever so quiet. Now, but a little bit about these seats. They're unusual. They're not, usually when you get in a vehicle like this, especially it has such excellent upholstery, which I've been sampling now for several days. It's very, very firm, the seating. You have a million different adjustments, especially for the driver. And, you know, I can do this, I can do this, I can inflate my bladder. Not my bladder, I'm sorry. I can inflate the bladder of the lumbar, which is what I'm doing right now. But overall, it's a very firm seat. And it's one of those situations where I remember years ago, when you went from an American car into, say, a German car, one of the first things people that had never driven a German car would notice is the fact that the seating was so much firmer. Now you see, you still have, depending on when you have pretty much broken pavement, even in the comfort setting, it's still pretty firm, but it's perfectly tolerable. It's not like harsh or anything like this, because I do believe, as I think I may have mentioned before, a lot of people considered earlier versions of this vehicle for the suspension to be on the stiff side, a little too stiff. And Jags, you know, you go back to your XK6s and all those that were wonderful cars. Not the world's most reliable cars in the world, but from a body standpoint and from interior accommodations, ride quality and everything, boy, those were nice sedans. But what you have now is, you know, we have this whole thing that engineers have to deal with that they never had to with manufacturers such as Jaguar, which is SUVs. They never, I would have loved, if I could go back, if my time machine was working, I'm still waiting on parts, I'd love to go back to the 70s and ask an engineer at Jaguar about, you go by and you see it says, how can I help? Cancel! How about that?
What house number, street, town, and state would you like to go to?
None of your business. None. Cancel. Go away. See? Cancel. Maybe it thinks I need to be British. Aye. Yeah. Cancel.
What house number, street, town, and state would you like to go to?
There. How about that? How about that there? Anyway, I can't stand it when the car interrupts you. That's another thing. If I was back in a time machine in the 70s, and I would point to the engineer, and as let's say a International Harvester Scout 2 drove by, a little SUV, I'd say, hey, have you guys at Jaguar ever thought about building one of those? And he just, I don't know what he'd do. He'd probably just burst out laughing. So how long before this car starts asking me what I want again? I never asked it for anything. I never said its name. I never said any kind of phrase like HELLO or something like that I thought would have cued it, but it seems to have a mind of its own, and it just wants to talk. I don't know about this cat. This is an awfully chatty cat. But it's quiet, and that's what I like about it. It's wonderfully quiet. Now this is a lot of money, this car right here. This is a lot more, you know, if you compare it in price to like a Nissan Sentra. Well, you're looking at a whole different kettle of worms here. Much more expensive, but boy, I tell you, it's the only thing that I'm a little disappointed in is there are certain aspects of the interior that are kind of cheap. Most of it isn't. Most of it is very high quality materials and stuff, but there's a few little bits and pieces, bits and bobs, and the feel of the controls and stuff. I have this real demanding standard for what I think an interior should be like when you're looking at something that's super expensive. And anything over $50,000 to me is getting into the super expensive for what you get. I mean, I don't know how much longer the pricing with things like pickup trucks is going to stay where it is, because it's insane. It's ludicrous to go out and pay 50 grand for a truck. You know, it's basically a school bus. They just, and granted, they load it up with a lot of technology now, like they do with everything, but not to the point of that they're jacking the prices up. And I think hopefully that's going to come down and make vehicles a little bit more affordable for everybody. Because this is still America, and we still don't have any way to get around except cars, unless you live in a really tight urban situation. And even if you want to buy an electric, you're going to be spending a lot of money. There aren't really any out there that are super cheap, although they're coming down. They're coming down. But despite what a lot of people think, I think we're going to have fuel-powered vehicles with us for quite some time. And I still think the most logical transition over would be to hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, but that's a whole different thing, and apparently the level of complexity on those things is pretty high. But it makes sense to me, because hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and as far as exhaust emissions are concerned, the only thing that comes out is water vapor. But that's not good either. You put out too much water vapor and you get damp. And they're still, I just hope all these manufacturers, and near as I can tell they're not, but I hope they continue to develop gasoline engines, and because when you hybridize something, you can dramatically cut down how much fuel it uses and still have all the performance you want and all the reliability you want. And ultimately, they also ensure a much longer life for the engine, because the engine's not used. When you drive 50,000 miles in a hybrid as opposed to 50,000 miles in a non-hybrid gas engine, guess what? The engine in the hybrid version is not near, it doesn't have literally as many hours on it, let's look at it that way, than you do with there's an Ioniq 6. I hadn't seen one in a while on the road. I like that car. That's a Hyundai. But I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be in Great Britain at the moment. This is one of my favorite turns right here, and this handles it just fine. There's a lot of weight to this vehicle, and it's really interesting because when everything went to body-on-frame construction, there are so few passenger vehicles these days that actually still have a frame. Very few, actually. They have, you know, the hardcore SUVs are it. But one of the reasons everybody's gone over from body-on-frame to unibody is because it supposedly lowers the weight of the vehicle. But in order, when you get a vehicle like this that has so much performance and is also supposed to have a bit of off-road characteristic to ability to it, what you're doing is you have to reinforce that unibody a lot. And they're also, unless things have changed, unibodies are much more expensive to produce than body-on-frame vehicles are. That's another reason why I think it's crazy how much they're charging for pickups these days. But in the act of actually reinforcing everything, even though we've got all kinds, we're using a lot more aluminum, we're using a lot more high-strength steel, which basically has the same strength as conventional steel at a dramatically lower weight. Well, dramatically, at a lower weight. And yet, these things still, this vehicle right now weighs about as much as a Toyota 4Runner does, and the 4Runner is actually a little bit bigger. And this thing weighs that much. Why? Well, mainly to do all the things you want it to do for a SUV, to be stout, quiet, the whole 9 yards, all the things you seek. And the big thing you've probably heard about many times is NVH, which is noise, vibration, and harshness. In order to make it acceptably quiet to be called a luxury vehicle and to get the price they're commanding, you have to put a lot of reinforcement. The body has a lot to it. And then you have, you know, a subframe. Usually the front and rear suspensions have a subframe. I believe that's what this vehicle has. Oh, it's got to. They all do. All unibodies. But what you have is you have the body structure, and then you have a unibody, which is a more steel, almost frame-like structure. that bolts to the unibody, and then you have your independent suspension attached to that. And that helps to isolate vibration, noise, and harshness from the cabin, as well as delivering very good handling. And if you do have some off-roading you need to do, it can do that. So, that was dramatic. Let us tame this Jaguar. Let us rub its belly. Well, look at here. Now, I'm always going on and on about Jaguar and their extensive use and development of aluminum, primarily in body panels. Well, that's not the only place they've been busy when it comes to aluminum, and that is, of course, in the suspension. Aluminum is good because it helps to lower your unsprung weight, so you have a lighter suspension component, and yet you can build stuff incredibly strong. But most importantly, you can make it attractive. As you can see with our rear suspension on our Jaguar F-Pace SVR, we do have a lower control arm that has a coil spring that is mounted up in its seat, if you will. And it's a multi-link setup, so we got links all over the place. And deep within, you can see just past that, here, naturally I have brought along the device. There is our drive shaft right in there. So it's way forward. The suspension is back compared to it. And here we have a lower link right here. Whoops. In addition to our main, what I like to call the main link, but you know, whatever. But in typical fashion, whenever you have a unibody construction, you have a subframe, which is this thing right here that runs all the way around. And this is what everything is bolted onto. And then right here, is our differential, rear differential. And it's a big sucker. But it's also, as you may notice, it's nice and high off the ground. I mean, this thing does have very good ground clearance. As I mentioned before, not the world's greatest tires for off-road work, but it has plenty of ground clearance. And there's a lot of cladding involved here. It's all, looks like ABS for the most part. It runs along the underside here. There you go, there you go. And as you can see, the lower link in the front, it, of course, is either cast or forged aluminum. I believe it's a casting. So here we go. We have a really stout setup here. And all this is designed primarily, the big goals of this vehicle, I think more than anything else, with it being a Jaguar, is really good handling on the road, and it has that. It also has a comfortable ride. It's not a super cushy Jag ride, as you might associate with the kind of cars like the Jaguar sedans, but it is definitely comfortable. And it is also looks like it has a fair ability to deal with the off-road obstacles to a certain extent. There's another link way up in there. Can you see that? Can you see all the way up there? I got the device right here for you. There it is. And there is a also what looks like to be a stabilizer bar, but I can't really fashion where the hell the thing goes. I think it runs all the way across on either side. But anyway, that's what we have here. And look at the size of these brakes. That's your caliper right in there. And this looks like part of your electronic braking in terms of your parking brake and emergency brake, which I've discussed at length earlier. A little bit different setup because you don't have a dedicated parking brake / emergency brake switch. It's all activated using the park switch, which that's what they've decided to do, and they're sticking to that. What else do we have here? Well, you have your exhaust setup here, which is quite interesting because, as you can see, there's a whole lot of square appliance inside here. Plus we have this here, which has a spring and all kinds of stuff. and it looks like it has an electric fitting. So when the exhaust changes, as in when you go into sport mode and things like that, there's actually a physical change. It's not, as near as I can tell, it's not just a purely audio enhancement type of thing, which you'll get on a lot of vehicles these days, but it's actually a physical one that changes the output and makes it sound different, and probably may do something to the horsepower. I don't know. But for the most part, it's a dual exhaust system. As you can see, we have the two pipes running right next to each other there. And oh, by the way, just above that, if you can see here, there is our drive shaft. So this is a purely mechanical system, and right up in there is where your transfer case is. So this is a very, I would call, conventional type of off-road four-wheel drive system that is actuated by primarily governed, I believe, by anti-spin software that's in both the ABS brakes and the traction control system. So that is one of the, and it's torque vectoring and everything else, so it uses a variety of inputs based on what the tires are doing to determine the front-back balance as to where your traction, your power is going to which drivetrain, or all four. So there you go. Do we have a lock mode? Not that I know of, but there's kind of an off-road mode in the drive mode settings, and I wouldn't be surprised if that actually does lock up the center differential. So again, this protection that we have here is fairly, I wouldn't call it flimsy, but I wouldn't call it as substantial either, because as you can see, it looks like it's fairly thin, and I don't believe that's metal. That looks very much like ABS plastic to me, which is very common, because the primary goal is not actually to protect the underside of the vehicle as much as provide some aerodynamics. Because believe it or not, when you have all these components hanging down, especially on a vehicle that has more ground clearance, those vehicle componentries like your transmission, your exhaust, and all the other fuel tank, all that stuff, does in fact contribute to a considerable amount of drag, which reduces your fuel economy. So that's what they have in place to try to deal with that. All right? Very nice, and like I said, quite a bit of ground clearance on our F-Pace for your off-road excursions. Well, let's climb out from under there. So here's our sticker. I know you're curious. The 2020 of our S-Pace SVR in ultra blue, by the way, has a MSRP of $91,900, and with options we came to $96,532. Yes, it's a Jaguar. It's not cheap, but I tell you what, I really enjoyed this thing. It has a much firmer ride than a lot of the Jaguars of the past, but at the same time, it can actually be used as a sport utility, which is mind-bending to me. The handling is extremely good, as you would expect, and probably the funnest thing is that wonderful supercharged engine. More power than you'll ever need, but it's there, and it's there for you. And I will be there for you next time when we look at something else that's really unusually interesting. Until that time, I want you to remember something. When you're in your car, you be careful out there. Pay attention. Don't be a total techie and focus on that screen too much, and look out the window from time to time. Take care, folks.
Do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube. You eat like the tube. You raise your children like the tube. You even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniacs. In God's name, you people are the real thing. We are the illusion.